Hello and welcome to TRT World. I'm Imran Garda. It's been 2 weeks since two huge earthquakes hit southern Türkiye, leaving tens of thousands dead and many more missing. The search and rescue operations have ended in all but two areas, Kahramanmaras and Hatay. The main focus now is caring for survivors, many of whom have had to leave their hometowns to find shelter and support elsewhere in the country. Alican Pamir spoke to survivors now staying in Istanbul.
Thousands of people have lost their homes after the devastating earthquakes in Turkey. The state is currently providing various forms of shelter for the displaced survivors. The Mahmut Celaleddin Ökten student dormitory in the suburbs of Istanbul has been turned into one such shelter in a joint effort between the local authorities and civic agencies. They're providing food, clothing, and a 24-hour health service. Those in need can also get psychological support. And the market offers essential goods. The children are being encouraged to carry on playing. And their tutors help them to express their feelings through different means, such as painting.
We try to share and help the trauma of our guests here. After registering them, we take the survivors to their rooms. Then, after health examinations, we provide food, clothing, and hygiene products. We created the leisure areas for children so that they could distance themselves from the mental wounds of this disaster. Both kids and adults have mental health care at their disposal. And in extreme cases, we help our guests reach hospitals and closely keep an eye on their stay there.
There are currently more than 1,100 people at the dorm. Some have been directed here through friends and family. Others, like Yusuf Kızılay from Adıyaman, simply made a phone call to AFAD asking for help.
I can't describe the earthquake. No words can describe it, but I can describe my situation here. Our home is now gone. The first 2 days were hard, but the public and the state helped. Our family is now scattered around Bursa and Urfa. I'm in Istanbul. The personnel here are most helpful, and we have everything we need. Now we're trying to build ourselves a new life.
Yusuf Binicioğlu is another displaced resident staying at the dorm. He arrived in Istanbul after his home in Antakya, which was built just 7 months ago, was severely damaged.
Only those who live through it can understand such disaster. We face death. I've lived through other earthquakes, but this was a devastating one. I was actually thinking of cleaning my home and going back there. But after seeing the damage, I decided to come here instead. I traveled from my hometown to Skinderun to Antalya. From there, I got to Izmir to finally reach Istanbul. We're being treated like as if we were in our hometown. But we'd still like to go back to Antakya. We all love our hometowns.
Despite the hardships of displacement, survivors like Ahmet İnan from Hatay say that through this shelter experience, they managed to make human connections once again.
First, we stayed in tents in our home, but because the city is in rubble, we decided to leave. But we are at peace here now. We feel like we're alive because we see other people.
The community at the shelter here shows that even though the displaced earthquake survivors have fallen on the hardest of times, they can find the types of support that can help them start rebuilding their lives. Alican Pamir, TRT World, Istanbul.
Joining me now is Sevki Serkan Erdogan, the owner of the Barbarossa Hotel and Villa in Kaş. So good to have you on the program. You opened your doors to people in need. They're staying in your hotel. They were displaced by the earthquake. Tell me why.
First of all, thank you, Imran, such a great journalist, giving me the opportunity to have this time window to tell me about my experiences. First of all, when I was thinking about why did I open, it was like the meaning of life. I wasn't really sure, but it was a good thing to do. You know, people in need, I will be very happy to help. That was my, simple explanation. But yesterday, I understood why I opened the doors of the hotel. We were having a meal, and there were a family of 14, extended family. And these people have lost 25 people of their close family. And they were having a dinner, and the kids got together on this particular table where I am talking to you. They were by the side having dinner. They were giggling. And I really felt this is why they were getting back to a normal life. And we were sitting at the background by the fireplace, and we were discussing their experiences, the losses. They were showing me the pictures of people, the children, the kids who died. So, the bad news, but then the good news, those who survive, and I am part of this. In fact, I am not just part of this. This is possible because our guests choose Barbarossa. They come here, they spend money, they spend time. We try to do our best, like the program that you had on the food, like the great chefs doing great work in Eastern Turkey. In our small way, we want to host these people very well. Tonight we are having a tandoori, Turkish tandoor. We really want to do our best, such that we somehow, this is not their expectation, better than their expectation.
How did most of them find your place? Because Kaş is not immediately accessible to the region that was affected.
You are right. The good news is the local authority, the mayor, the governor, and so on, the very first day, they were in touch with us. And we were the first hotel, actually, we just wanted to be part of this. And we used those channels, and there were plenty of people we could host. At the very beginning, there were some short stays, people who had smashed cars and so on coming with maybe not even enough clothing. Then it became more steady. Currently, the people who are staying with us, they have houses back, in particular, quite a few from from Gaziantep at this point. Those people have homes that are standing, but they are not sure whether it's safe. And they are getting news all the time about the fact that their houses are shaking and so on and so forth. So this is a place where they can feel peaceful, they can eat well, they can recover, they can tell their stories. In fact, we are almost like a psychologue to them. We were sitting by the fire yesterday discussing. One of them, two of them are actually drummers. One of them is a singer. That particular guy sang 2 songs, and some of the ladies were crying. Said, "Please don't sing the song." They were local songs, and the songs were there were no musical instrument. It was just like getting together, and they were telling about what the experiences and how horrible, how difficult that was, and how they could. They were having such a difficult time there, and this was like a window of peace, being here in Barbarossa, to feel better about himself. He was talking about the children. They were very, I don't want to be very graphical, but it was very painful for actually to have such experiences. So he did some he prayed for the victims. That was another moment which stays with me.
A little bubble, a little cove of the best of humanity in heartbreaking times. I wish you well. And I thank you so much for joining us on the program. And thank you so much for all the good work that you do.
Imran, thank you for the opportunity. We are in a little corner of the world. Hope we'll see you guys and some of the people who will get a chance to view this program. Thank you again.
Certainly. Take care.
Yeah.
Now, the UNHCR says in Syria alone, as many as 5.3 million people will need some form of shelter assistance. Meanwhile, in Turkey, around 16% of the country's population has been affected by the quakes. Left homeless, people are seeking refuge in camps set up by NGOs and government programs. While some people have chosen to leave the area, others are hoping to rebuild their lives.
We're getting away from here, but we have no idea what will happen when we get to Karahisar province. What do we do here? What do we do there? Last year there was the COVID and they told us to stay at home. Now we can't go home. I don't know. I don't have a plan. My only wish is that my wife and my children are okay.
We are going to Afyon in Karahisar province. We want a job. We want a home there. A new life, a new start. We'll try to heal our wounds with the help from our government.
We will wait for a while at least, until the aftershocks are over, or until we are able to go back home again. There is nothing to do at the moment. We live in fear.
There are around 200 to 300 families staying in shelters, but we can't secure more tents for them. And if there are tents available, their prices have doubled.
We've seen an increase in demand for our tents after the earthquake. We work until very late to be able to provide enough tents for those who have been displaced. And we have issues with a shortage of raw materials, especially that most of the border crossings are closed.
To help broaden out this discussion now, I'm joined from Istanbul by Didem Demircan. She is a Deputy Executive Director of the Foundation for the Support of Women's Work in Türkiye, an affiliated NGO of the Oxfam Confederation. We have Bahia Zrikem in Gaziantep, Türkiye, the Policy and Advocacy Manager at Norwegian Refugee Council Syria Response. And also in Gaziantep is Obaid Sakin, the Country Director at Human Appeal UK. Good to have you all on the program. Didem, we spoke to somebody, an individual who opened up his doors, his heart to people coming in. It gets more complicated when you're dealing with governments, with NGOs, and you're dealing with masses of people. We're looking at the numbers. It's hard to put a tally to it, but sometimes I think, well, maybe the numbers aren't the important thing here. I wonder, Didem, how difficult is it to give people who are on the move shelter, but adequate shelter given that it's going to be temporary? And whether temporary means a few weeks, a few months, or maybe even a year, well, it's up to a multitude of factors. Tell me about the difficulty.
Yes, I mean, we as KEDEV were also in the area when 1999 earthquake hit the Marmara region. And from this experience, we know that the temporary shelters like the container cities will be there maybe for a couple of years. So we really need to make sure that these container cities, as we call them, or temporary shelter areas, need to be ready for all the needs of the people living there. And we know that the children and women, they have specific needs that need to be met in such areas. So we know that women have different hygiene needs, so these need to be met. They have, I mean, we need to make sure that they are provided with private spaces for women and children, where they can get away from the daily issues, daily anxieties, daily challenges, and get together in solidarity so that they can also try to heal the trauma. And we also know that these people will be rebuilding their lives. So we need to make sure we support them when they are also rebuilding their livelihoods. Like if they want to start their own businesses, if they want to get employed, we need to make sure that we support the people with necessary resources that they need. That can be skills, or that can be finance or equipment, or collective spaces to produce. So we as the NGOs will be there for a long time to make sure that all these needs are met.
Right. Bahia, as things stand right now, how is it going? Overall, collectively, this is a quickly and ever-evolving situation. But has the response overall been adequate, both in Türkiye and across the border in Syria?
I would speak mostly about Syria. I don't have much expertise on Turkey immediately, but what I can say about Syria is that the response has been too late. No search and rescue teams were sent. Only 5% of the areas that were affected by the earthquake were actually searched, and they were only searched by volunteers and local organizations without any support. So I think the beginning of the response has been too slow, and we failed to actually respond to people's needs. Right now, local organizations, INGOs, UN, all the coordination is starting to increase and scale up, thankfully, but we still don't have enough funding. We still don't have enough resources. And as my colleague said, right now we're responding to the immediate needs, but at some point we will need to start cleaning the rubbles. We will need to start assessing the buildings for people to be able to go back. We will need to provide people with some hope for the future. So schools need to reopen again, etc. And we don't have the resources. We don't know how we're going to do in the future.
Yeah, that's an extensive to-do list. Obaid, you're able to operate on the ground in Syria. Tell us a little bit about some of the housing that you are creating, the homes that you are building for people displaced by the earthquake.
Correct. Just before the earthquake hit, we had already prepared for 1,000 shelters as part of our integrated shelter program. And it was actually going to receive IDPs in a couple of months, according to our plan. But obviously, in times of emergency, plans change. And we utilized the capacity we have. And so far, we have admitted more than 600 families into our shelters located in Killi community, part of Martin Hussein sub-district. Well, we have seen great support from other NGOs as well. That's how we were able to meet certain needs. Although we covered the shelters, as soon as we opened our collective center, we have seen other colleagues coming in and helping to the IDPs. But as my colleague Bahia said, it did not happen immediately. There were certain problems in responding to this earthquake, particularly because search and rescue is not something that many of the NGOs have expertise on in the region. And having only one cross-border, and this cross-border being located in the south of Antakya, which is a devastated city, had also hampered the rescue efforts. But today, things are getting better, and the humanitarian efforts are more coordinated, which we are happy to see.
And Obaid, as far as I understand, you're building in Idlib, right? That's where you're housing people.
That's correct.
Tell me who has to give you permission and how you have to navigate the red tape over there and how it differs to other areas.
Well, Idlib is obviously a disputed region, but that's also where around 400 IDPs live and settled for a long time. And in order to make these arrangements, we are working with the related clusters and definitely with local community leaders. That's actually pretty much the same process for if you want to distribute food items or NFI items. This is all coordinated under, particularly, I mean, the leadership is definitely UN agencies, but then also other NGOs coming together and discussing the needs. And we have maps and humanitarian needs assessments. All of this come together to help us make these decisions.
Right. And we swing this back to Didem because when we talk about people affected by these earthquakes, and again, it's not countries, it's people. And it just, by an accident of geography, whether you are on this side of the border or that side of the border, in many ways is pure luck. These issues are inextricably intertwined, and for many Syrian refugees, they are double displaced within the boundaries of Türkiye. How easy or difficult is it to address that issue?
Well, it is not easy because, as you are saying, the Syrian refugees were already, having some hardships in trying to build their lives here in Turkey, and now they maybe had to move to another city, or they are now sheltering in a place in the affected area. So we again have been working with the refugees before the earthquake hit. But now there will need to be additional support that needs to be provided to the refugee families as well, because they had also been going through this trauma, the earthquake trauma, so they would need additional support, both in terms of like the psychological healing process, to heal the wounds after this big disaster, but also again to maybe start their new lives wherever they decided to settle in this next phase, maybe in another city or maybe in another part of the city that they have been living in.
Yeah, and Didem, people have not only lost loved ones, they've not only lost their homes, they've also lost their IDs, their passports, their access to cash. They've lost if they had bank cards, they lost bank cards. Is there some way to help them in that regard?
Yes, I mean, we know that it's not only papers, but it's also, as you have been saying, maybe their savings, their shops, their products, their goods. We know many micro-sized women entrepreneurs, for example, in the area, and we have been working, for example, with the grassroots women's organizations and women's cooperatives in those 11 provinces, and we know that many of them lost their products, their savings, the shops that they were working in. So definitely we need to be providing long-term support while they are restarting these businesses. And as I said, it can be in terms of providing the necessary papers that they lost during this disaster, or skills or savings, financial resources, in whichever way they need this support.
Bahia, you mentioned earlier that there is a funding shortfall. How quickly can new funds be put to use in a situation such as this one?
There are many mechanisms, both at UN level, but also at different levels. Donors have what we call emergency mechanisms of releasing fund and dispersing fund much faster when an emergency occurs. And this is what we need from them, to put in place those mechanisms and to allow Syrian organizations, local organizations like NRC and others that are on the ground and ready to scale up. We need those funds to be dispersed as quickly as possible for us to continue our response. In the past weeks, we tried to support. We managed to support more than 3,000 families with cash, with distributions and other distributions. And now we need to scale up. As my colleague said, we need to find new shelters, both emergency shelters, but also build maybe some temporary shelters for new displaced people. We will need to rehabilitate new networks, etc. And we need funding to come for that as well, and to come as fast as possible. So there are different mechanisms through the UN, through different donors, that can be put in place. They were put in place, but we are still expecting, or we're still waiting for larger amounts of money to be actually put into those mechanisms.
Right. Obaid, what needs to happen in the next 3 to 6 months in order to give these people the best possible chance at a dignified restart in their lives?
Particularly for Syria, the earthquake is the only last drop of the events that accumulated in the last decade. And the shelter problem, housing problem, or maybe in humanitarian terms, I would just stick with shelter problem, is a long-standing problem for Syria. There are certain approaches by classes, by the UN, there are different suggestions, but then it's really debatable whether we have the shelter type that would really be sustainable, but also it is in compliance with different regulations that such activities are restricted with. What needs to happen now is actually we need to now look forward from more from immediate relief to development, and not just actually creating shelters, but also this should be coupled with certain livelihood projects to somehow increase populations, develop populations into self-sufficient communities. Otherwise, in any disaster such as this, we see actually how fragile are the humanitarian system, regardless of all its efforts and all the resources that are conveyed to it.
Yeah, that's true. It is indeed a very fragile humanitarian system. There are good people on the ground doing their utmost. to try and help the tens of thousands of people affected. Unfortunately, time is our enemy at this moment in time, and I have to move on. But I thank you all so much for joining us here on this program. All the best to you all. Well, that's it from us for now. Our coverage continues here on TRT World.